Welcome to NTD Evening News. Our top story tonight, President Trump announcing the timeline for all Gaza hostages to be released. What the turning point was in negotiations and what the president is saying about the next phase of his peace plan. Iris Tao at the White House. New York Attorney General Letitia James indicted for mortgage fraud, what the charges allege and how she and the Justice Department are responding. The Senate again fails to pass the continuing resolution, and the government remains shut down now for 9 days straight. Senate Democrats are calling on House Republicans to send them a new bill that would extend tax credits for Obamacare. Jack Bradley reports.
This is NTD Evening News, live from our global headquarters in New York City. Here's Tiffany Meyer.
Good evening and thank you for joining us tonight. Israel and the Hamas terrorist group have agreed to the first phase of President Trump's Gaza peace plan. The first phase includes the release of all remaining hostages in exchange for Palestinian prisoners. NTD's Jason Perry has the story.
The girlfriend of a hostage held in the Gaza Strip started the celebrations in Tel Aviv after hearing the news that all hostages would soon be released. And the mother of the same hostage thanked God for the good news they received on Wednesday night. The first phase of the deal, which Israel and Hamas agreed to, calls for the fighting to stop and includes the release of all remaining hostages, the living and the deceased, in exchange for Palestinian prisoners held by Israel. Other family members of hostages thanked President Trump, who was on speakerphone.
Thank you so much. Blessed be the peacemakers.
God bless you, Mr. President. God bless America.
Thank you very much. You just take care of yourselves. The hostages will come back. They're all coming back on Monday.
However, Trump later said Monday or Tuesday as things continue to unfold. Still, the celebrations continued at what has become known as Hostages Square.
It's a holiday here. That's what we wanted for such a long time. Carmel, my cousin, was murdered in captivity. She's not going to come back. It's too late for her, but it's not too late for 48 hostages who are going to come back. 20 of them are going to come back alive. And this is such a happy moment for us, the families of the hostages. Such a happy moment for all Israelis and for all the Middle East.
And on the same day, residents in the Gaza Strip were seen celebrating the pause in fighting, as well as emergency personnel who have seen the tragedies of war firsthand.
Honestly, these are indescribable feelings. We can't believe it. But thank God the war has ended and we are alive. Honestly, we hope the war does not come back and for this to be really the end, with no death and destruction afterwards.
The first phase of the agreement also includes a partial withdrawal of Israeli troops from the Gaza Strip, and Israeli tanks were seen driving on the Gaza coast on Thursday. An Israeli government spokesperson said the ceasefire would go into force within 24 hours of government approval of the deal. After that 24-hour period, the hostages held in Gaza would be freed within 72 hours. Meanwhile, Turkey plans to take part in monitoring the ceasefire agreement on the ground in Gaza. An Israeli analyst said the biggest challenge for a lasting peace will be trying to get Hamas to lay down their weapons. That's something the terrorist group has not yet agreed to. Jason Perry, NTD News.
World leaders are reacting with praise and hope after President Trump announced the Gaza deal. Here's what they said.
A grateful nation thanks President Trump for the return of the hostages, for the peace he has brought to the region. I call on the Nobel Committee to award President Trump the Nobel Peace Prize. He did something unbelievable. I thank him, I thank his team, Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner, Marco Rubio, and Tony Blair.
This is a moment of profound relief that we felt around the world, but particularly for the hostages, their families, and for the civilian population of Gaza.
Today, the world has cause for real hope. Hope for the families of the hostages who have kept a 2-year vigil that must have felt like an eternity. Hope for the people of Gaza who have endured suffering beyond imagining.
Developments in Israel give us cause for optimism. There is clearly a great opportunity to reach an agreement with Hamas in the coming hours already. There is a chance that the hostages will be released this week.
European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and French President Emmanuel Macron also welcomed the agreement. Macron said the agreement must also mark the beginning of a political solution ending with a two-state outcome. Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan said Trump demonstrated the necessary political will to encourage the Israeli government toward the ceasefire. And President Trump projecting optimism that Hamas will disarm as the peace deal unfolds. Both the Democrats and Republicans crediting Trump for his peace efforts. Joining us now live is NTD's White House correspondent Iris Tao. Good evening, Iris. What is the latest we're hearing about the historic peace deal?
Good evening to you as well, Tiff. So we've seen some historic breakthrough in the past 24 hours. President Trump announcing that all the remaining hostages in Gaza will be released next Monday or Tuesday, and adding that he's planning to travel to the Middle East himself, including a stop in Egypt to sign an official deal and also to mark the moment. Here's him talking at a cabinet meeting earlier today. Watch.
The war in Gaza and really on a much bigger basis created peace, and I think it's going to be a lasting peace, hopefully an everlasting peace. Peace in the Middle East. We secured the release of all of the remaining hostages, and they should be released on Monday or Tuesday. That'll be a day of joy.
And Tiv, a rewind of how we came here. We know that yesterday, President Trump, during a roundtable, got a note from Secretary of State Marco Rubio telling him that a deal is now very close. And that also comes after last week, President Trump officially announced a 20-point peace plan together with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu here at the White House. And of course, we now have an official agreement to phase one of the deal from both Israel and Hamas. And on what's next down the road, President Trump today projecting optimism, saying that he believes that Hamas will eventually disarm and that Israel will further pull back inside Gaza. He also reiterates that nobody will be forced to leave Gaza and that the area will be rebuilt into a livable area. Tiff.
And Iris, tell us more about how President Trump's team secured this deal. What's the White House been telling you?
Sure. So U.S. senior officials held a call with us just earlier today, telling us more about the behind-the-scenes moments about how we actually came here. So a big thing that happened was when Steve Witkoff as well as Jared Kushner, the two main negotiators really on the ground, when they detected a shift in which they said Hamas was viewing hostages as a liability rather than an asset. They said that was an important turning point where they were discussing and going over. And they also mentioned that they were really consulting with the Arab leaders in the region and taking their feedback on their peace plan and making changes to the 20-point peace plan. Of course, a lot of that culminated during a meeting at the United Nations General Assembly last month, where President Trump really met with a lot of the regional leaders and discussed with them in person. And eventually, they said that they separated the deal into two important phases, which is now the phase one we're seeing release of all the hostages, and next will be about the governance of Gaza. And this is Secretary of State Marco Rubio today during the cabinet meeting, talking about that important meeting that happened last month at the UN. Watch.
You convened an historic meeting, not simply of Arab countries, but of Muslim majority countries from around the world, including Indonesia was there, Pakistan was there, and created this coalition behind this plan. Then on that following Monday, you met with the Prime Minister of Israel here, and that plan was presented. And then, of course, our great negotiating team followed up on it. In the interim, again, perhaps the stories will be told, perhaps they will never be told. The president had some extraordinary phone calls and meetings that required a high degree of intensity and commitment, and made this happen.
And on the call tonight, senior U.S. officials also told us more specifically about how President Trump really played a big role in all of this. They said that he really gave full authority to both Steve Witkoff as well as Jared Kushner for them to negotiate directly. And sometimes he would directly call into those important calls with the interlocutors and very spontaneously, and really stood behind his own 20-point peace plan. And they also told us that President Trump remained very accessible during during the whole process, taking calls from his main officials in the negotiations really 24/7 anytime during the day. And of course, the team on the ground worked very hard. Jared Kushner and Wyckoff saying that they did not get much sleep actually during the past 3 days, almost 5 hours of sleep during the past few days of intense negotiations. Of course, the main goal here is not only to get this Hamas and Israel conflict to stop, but as they say, to bring larger peace in the Middle East in the long term. Tiff.
And Iris, on that note, before I let you go, what are some reactions to the deal?
Sure. So the Finnish president was actually visiting the White House today after the cabinet meeting, and he called the deal historic and said this is diplomacy at its best. Watch.
I went through the 20 points. It's almost like the best of record. You really see all the key elements. This is what diplomacy is at its best, and I think it's a potentially huge deal.
And we're also hearing a feedback from both sides of the aisle. Of course, Republicans praising President Trump, but also even Democrats now crediting President Trump for his peacemaking efforts. Here are some Democratic senators talking about it today. Watch.
I applaud President Trump and the team and all for getting to this step. The release of the hostages is such good news.
We are on the precipice of a monumental and historic achievement, and President Trump deserves a measure of credit for it. So do others.
And of course, we have heard President Trump touting repeatedly that he has settled by now 7 major conflicts and wars. Of course, this is what he calls number 8 now, but we know that tomorrow the Nobel Peace Prize will be announced, and President Trump saying today that he doesn't know if he's going to get it, but he says, quote, "I didn't do it for that." Tiff.
All right, Iris, thanks for those updates. And Capitol Hill was quick to react to the acceptance of President Trump's Gaza peace plan. Both sides cheered the news. NTD's Melina Weiskup has the report.
Lawmakers from both sides of the aisle were quick to celebrate this hostage release deal, all saying that this is, yes, step one, but it is a crucial step to ensure lasting peace is possible in the region. Republican Speaker Mike Johnson, as well as the Republican leadership team this morning, said that this deal was only possible with Trump in the White House. Listen.
And I want to tell you just how grateful that I am that the hostages are finally coming home and that peace in the Middle East is on the horizon. And I want to look right to you and say thank you, President Trump, because without you as our leader, this would not have happened.
Notably, one Senate Democrat joined with Republicans to directly give credit to President Trump for making this hostage deal possible. Senator John Fetterman posted Trump's announcement on X, congratulating the president directly, saying, "Our parties are different, but we have a shared ironclad commitment to Israel and its people." I point this out because his response was different than some other Democrats that we saw who were celebrating the news, but also fell short of directly giving that credit to the president. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer said that he looks forward to the end of the war and building Gaza without Hamas, but he notes the work is not over. Any step to end this nightmare is one that should be celebrated and carefully implemented and followed through on.
The prisoners back after all this time means so much. Think of what it means to their families, it means to all of us, and to find a way to end this war. And it's really a big deal.
As for the government shutdown, emotions are running high here on Capitol Hill as we enter the 9th day of the shutdown. There were 2 separate confrontations yesterday. 2 Democrat senators held a press gaggle outside of House Speaker Mike Johnson's office. He then came out and confronted the 2 Senate Democrats. Today, he told us he did that to set the record straight. Then later in the day, you also had a different confrontation with a Republican Congressman, Mike Lawler, and the Democrat Minority Leader, Hakeem Jeffries. Watch this.
You're not going to talk to me. You're not going to talk to me and talk over me.
New York residents
because you don't want to hear what I have to say.
Oh, I'm listening.
So why don't you just keep your mouth shut?
Oh, emotions are high. People are upset. I'm upset. I'm a very patient man, but I am very angry right now because this is dangerous stuff. And so, is it better for them probably to be physically separated right now? Yeah, it probably is, frankly.
House Speaker Mike Johnson has not yet called Republicans back here to Washington, D.C. to hold votes, saying that their work is done. They've passed the continuing resolution to reopen the government, and now it's on the Senate to act. But so far, all of those votes in the Senate have not yet been successful. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Weiskup, NTD News.
For the second day in a row, a Justice Department attorney asks a Ninth Circuit panel of judges to allow federalized National Guard troops to be deployed in Oregon. NTD's Arlene Richards has the details.
A Department of Justice attorney on Thursday explained to a three-judge panel why the National Guard should be deployed in Oregon.
The second time in recent months, a district court in this circuit has entered a heretofore unprecedented order enjoining the president from calling up the National Guard to protect federal personnel and property from violence aimed at thwarting federal law enforcement. The ICE facility in Portland and the federal law enforcement officers who work there have faced a steady stream of violence, threats of violence, and harassment from violent agitators bent on impeding federal immigration enforcement.
The administration is contending that protests against federal officers and property is equivalent to a rebellion, and local law enforcement is not able to control it. The justices focused on the language of the law relied on by the Trump administration to federalize the National Guard. For example, they asked what is the meaning of the word rebellion. Oregon's attorney said the protests are not that bad.
So it needs to be this significant, intense, large-scale situation that really it has such a large impact on the fabric of the country. I mean, if we're comparing it to an invasion from a foreign power, that's something that goes to the heart of the safety of our country. And when it explains also why the president has deference in these circumstances.
She also said that the president's actions are limited by the current circumstances, which she argued are no longer emergencies. Current block on the deployment of troops will remain in place until at least October 19th, unless the Ninth Circuit overturns it. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
Amid ongoing protests, assaults, and threats of violence happening outside ICE locations, Homeland Security Secretary Noem says the department is hardening its facilities and purchasing additional buildings. NTD correspondent Jason Blair joins us live now from Portland, Oregon, where protests have been going on since June. Good evening, Jason. What can you tell us?
Hey, Tiffany. Yeah, so Noem says that they are not backing down. She told President Trump earlier today during a cabinet meeting. As you mentioned, they are looking to increase the amount of buildings, particularly in the Chicago area and Portland, Oregon area here, to purchase more buildings for their ICE facilities and so they can operate out of them. Here's what she told President Trump earlier today.
We're going to not back off. In fact, we're doubling down because what they're trying to do with these riots and violence is distract us and keep us from going after those murderers and rapists that are out in the streets.
And as far as National Guard Attorney General Pam Bondi said that today the Justice Department attorneys are working on the cases arguing in court that are trying to hold up the deployment of National Guard here in Oregon, as well as some holdups in Illinois. Here's what she told President Trump about that earlier today as well.
My lawyers are in court right now as we speak for you, arguing in Chicago and Portland to keep them safe, to bring in the Guard. The government doesn't want it there, but we do. We're going to keep their citizens safe, thanks to you.
The people want it. I don't understand the politics.
And just about an hour ago, actually, the Department of Homeland Security said that two of their officers were attacked, or at least two of their vehicles with officers inside of them were attacked. They did post a video showing this incident. It shows a guy running up to one of the vehicles and throwing a rock through the back of the vehicle. The department said that this individual was arrested and very likely he will probably see felony assault charges. Let's go ahead and share that video that they posted a little bit ago. And Secretary Noem was here recently on Tuesday here in Portland. She said she met with the governor of Oregon, as well as the mayor here and chief of police. And she did say that she will quadruple the amount of federal agents here on the ground if the authorities here do not take some of the security measures that they suggested in place. Yeah, back to you on that, and we will keep here on the ground in Portland.
Well, on that note, Jason, what's it been like on the ground outside of the Portland ICE facility?
Yeah, so the facility is not that far from here. Behind me, down the street a little bit, I was there last night, and there were some protesters out in front of the facility, out in front of the driveway. Sometimes there are even counter-protesters out there. I did not see any last night, but what happens is when the cars need to come in and out of the driveway there, the agents will come out and move the protesters back. And that's when things can get a little bit dicey. That's when most of the arrests have been made that we have seen. Last night, I did not see any arrests happen, but I did see some of the protesters get physically pushed back for getting too close to the agents. And then actually the FBI Portland did say yesterday that recently one protester was arrested for spitting on one of the officers and was charged with felony assault. So they really aren't messing around. They don't want their officers to be, touched or getting too close to, and they do seem to mean business. But that's when these interactions can happen, is when the cars go in and out and the agents come outside. And I will be back there tonight and have more to report on tomorrow. Back to you.
All right, Jason, thanks for those updates and stay safe. As the government shutdown continues for the 9th day, half of the federal government's employees are furloughed. Many others are working without pay. The Democrats in the Senate say they won't vote for the continuing resolution unless it extends tax credits for Obamacare. NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley has more.
The motion is not agreed to.
The Senate on Thursday once again failed to advance the continuing resolution in a 54-45 vote. Most Republicans voting for it, most Democrats voting against. They need 60 to overcome the filibuster and reopen the government. Now, the shutdown gives the president the authority to decide what gets funded during this time. President Trump at a cabinet meeting saying he's planning on cutting Democrat programs.
And we'll be making cuts that will be permanent. And we're only going to cut Democrat programs.
Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer says each day the government is shut down, it's better for the Democratic Party.
Each day our case to fix health care and end the shutdown gets better and better, stronger and stronger.
This continuing resolution put forward by Republicans extends the current levels of funding to government agencies, which were set under the Biden administration by a Democrat-controlled Congress. But Democrats now insist on changes to what was once their own bill before they vote for it. Those changes extend the tax credits under the Affordable Care Act. Those credits are set to expire on December 31st. Insurance companies set their rates on November 1st, so if it's not included in the CR, they're worried premiums will spike.
It's time for House Republicans to get back in town, get to the negotiating table to urgently extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits to avoid tens of millions of Americans from having to pay dramatically increased premiums, co-pays, and deductibles.
House Majority Leader Steve Scalise says that these tax credits were supposed to expire because they were meant for the pandemic.
Again, it was Democrats who created the subsidies, and they said it was temporary for COVID. Remember, COVID is over. They set these up to be COVID-only temporary subsidies.
While the government shutdown continues, over 750,000 federal employees have been furloughed, many more working without pay, including active duty military, TSA agents, air traffic controllers, and Border Patrol agents. Reporting by Jack Bradley, NTD News.
And we have breaking news. New York Attorney General Letitia James was just indicted on 2 charges related to a mortgage loan. A grand jury in the Eastern District of Virginia indicted her on 1 count of bank fraud and 1 count of false statements to a financial institution. According to the indictment, James bought a house in Norfolk, Virginia in 2020 with a mortgage loan. Under the loan agreement, she has to occupy the property as a secondary residence and not rent it out to anyone. The indictment claims that James violated the agreement by using the house as an investment property and renting it out. The Justice Department said James obtained a more favorable mortgage worth $18,000 less by misrepresenting the use of the property. In a statement, the Justice Department said, quote, "The facts and the law in this case are clear, and we will continue following them to ensure that justice is served." If convicted, the New York Attorney General faces up to 60 years in prison and fines of up to $2 million. She responded to the indictment, calling it a, quote, "desperate weaponization of our justice system." She also denied the charges and vowed to fight them in court. James's first court date is set for October 24th. Coming up, Russia is taking partial responsibility for killing 28 civilians on a commercial flight. Arian Pozdar has how tensions between Moscow and the West are rising once again when we return. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Russia is taking partial responsibility for killing 28 civilians on a commercial flight. Meanwhile, tensions between Moscow and the West are rising once again. NTD's international correspondent Arian Pozdar has more.
Russian President Vladimir Putin takes partial responsibility for striking and downing an Azerbaijan Airlines flight in December last year. He blames Ukrainian drones which were near the plane and technical failures in the Russian air defense system.
There was a Ukrainian drone in the sky. We were tracking 3 such drones that crossed the Russian border on the night of the tragedy. The second reason is technical failures of the Russian air defense system itself. The 2 missiles that were fired did not directly hit the plane.
And the European Union's sanctions chief says the measures are clearly hurting the Russian economy. Last week, the Group of 7, or G7, agreed to coordinate and intensify sanctions against Moscow. That's by targeting countries that buy Russian oil and thereby enable sanction circumventions.
All the indicators in the Russian economy are flashing red. Russia is struggling economically. They're running out of money. They are struggling with high interest rates, high inflation, with a squeezed labor market, companies being forced to take bad loans by the government to finance the war economy. So all of this is indicative of the extent of the pressure Russia is under as a result of our sanctions.
It's not clear yet if the US would support any further sanctions against the Kremlin. Meanwhile, in Ukraine, officials say 5 people are injured after a Russian drone attack on the Odessa region.
Tonight, Russia has attacked the Odessa region with drones causing fire. 2 residential houses were on fire, 4 houses were damaged. A gas station was on fire too.
More than 80 fighters were deployed to assist fighting the flames. Ukrainian officials say over 30,000 people were left without electricity. Arian Pozdar, NTD News.
As Israel and Hamas agree to phase 1 of a U.S.-backed ceasefire deal, does President Trump deserve a Nobel Peace Prize? NTD's Sam Wong was out on the National Mall in D.C. to hear from the people.
Right now, Israel and Hamas have agreed to a ceasefire deal proposed by President Trump. So we're talking like hostage release, we're talking humanitarian aid going to Gaza. Do you think President Trump deserves a Nobel Peace Prize?
I really have no thoughts on what people deserve on that. I'm just glad that peace is being negotiated and moving forward.
If he can get it done, I mean, it needed to happen because it's tragic what's going on in Gaza. I've been there multiple times. I don't think Israel's going to tolerate Hamas having any kind of armament.
His eagerness to want to resolve not only what's happening in the Middle East, but also what's happening with Russia. He is certainly a person that deserves the Peace Prize, no doubt.
The Peace Prize, I don't know yet. Whether the peace will hold, I doubt it. I think he's trying. Now, will they actually hold up to the deal? If they hold up to the deal, it's going to be done.
So it's up to Israel and Hamas eventually?
Yeah, it's up to Hamas.
Right now, the next 72 hours is going to be very critical, right? So Israel and Hamas have just about that much time to make sure all the conditions are met. Who do you think is the bigger variable of the two? In other words, do you think Hamas is going to budge?
I think they're going to have no choice but to oblige. You know, Trump's a person who wants to make a deal, you know, and make peace on both sides.
I think there's volatility on both sides. I think that both sides have realized it's really a time to put an end to all of this.
Trump has already indicated by what he did with Iran that once that deadline's hit, you know, time's out. Hamas doesn't have much time to respond.
On that note, are you confident that President Trump is going to handle this whole situation well at the end?
Well, he's done amazing things with trying to bring peace around the globe. So the fact that they've been able to make progress, that he's been able to make progress in the administration is indication that he's got the ability to do it. It's just the willingness. I think Hamas is holding the cards.
Let's see it truly happen.
Are you optimistic?
We have hope. We have hopes. We're optimistic, but I'm not sure if we're realistic or not.
He's tough that way. You know, that's just how he breakers deals. He's a deal maker. You know, so that's one thing that he was like that in his civilian life, and now he's like that as a president. So
I'm eternally optimistic, man. God is good, and you know, things like that is. I just hope it does work out. I pray we all just make it through to the end, and that peace is ultimately concluded.
And joining us now to discuss the Gaza peace deal is Steve Yates. He's a senior fellow for national security policy at the Heritage Foundation. Steve, as always, thank you so much for joining us. Now, first, before we delve into the details here, just how significant is this deal?
Well, it's very significant because this has been a truly awful situation to watch unfold, starting with the absolute travesty that occurred 2 years ago on October 7th. And then to see the war drag on is of course very, very difficult. And President Trump has been very adamant, invested a lot of time and resources by his full team to try to negotiate this peace. So getting to this point was a lot of work. Now we're still sort of at step one of a 20-step process for this peace plan to hold. They get harder over time as you deal with final disposition of land and sovereignty, some of the role of regional powers and who's going to keep the peace. But you don't get to any of those later steps unless we get the first ones. And that's where I do think the president deserves a lot of credit for tenacity in getting us to here.
And on that note, phase one of the deal is to release all remaining hostages. President Trump saying as soon as Monday or Tuesday. Now, Israel will release roughly 2,000 Palestinian prisoners and withdraw its troops to an agreed upon line. What will this peace deal look like in practice?
Well, that is the first acid test. There should never have been hostages taken. It should be stunning to people, no matter what their view is of how the war's been conducted over time. You were talking about a very few people left alive after 2 years being returned, some remains being returned, and thousands of people who have engaged in likely combatant behavior going back the other way. It's an uneven deal, but it is the price for peace. Israel sounds ready, willing, and able to go in that direction with the backing of the United States. But I think deeply behind this, success or failure on this rests with the Abraham Accords coalition doing its magic to help be the peacekeepers, help enforce the terms, and be the investors for reconstruction and development to try to hold the peace. It's really ultimately that revival of the Abraham Accords coalition and maybe growing it that will be more significant than the U.S. and Israel and the leaders in the Palestinian areas at this point.
I want to get to the Abraham Accords, but as you mentioned, this is a 20-part peace plan. What kind of timeline can we expect for implementation here?
Well, I am sure, just as he has done with the negotiations everywhere, including with Gaza, President Trump will set short timelines and he'll put pressure and then he'll have the responsibility to have audibles called to enforce that pressure and timeline. And if you don't do that, this stuff drags on insufferably long. I expect this to be a protracted process. I would expect it to be longer than months and maybe more than a year or two to get through all 20 points. And it would be a blessing if it was faster. But realistically, this has been a 2-year war in response to a horrific terrorist act. The removal of Hamas as a terrorist organization playing any kind of leadership or influential role in the Palestinian territories is a significant strategic change. We'll have to see how that holds. And so I would just be cautious about getting through all of these steps quickly. It still matters a great deal to get through the first few steps, though. And so I wouldn't sell short any of the effort and progress achieved in that regard.
I want to dig into that as the deal calls for the dismantling and de-radicalization of Hamas, and Gaza would be governed by a temporary apolitical committee to ensure another October 7th doesn't happen. What role will Arab nations play in this deal?
Well, my assumption is that those Abraham Accords Arab allies would play a significant role in terms of funding and building whatever kind of coalition of peacekeepers This is somewhat echoes of the Russia-Ukraine negotiations. There will be some questions or sensitivities about what countries are involved or not involved. And from an America First point of view and sort of a Trump foreign policy point of view, it's unlikely and not really being talked about that Americans would be involved in that process. I think we'll be looking at coalitions. They could come from South Asia. They could come from any other region of the world. But I expect those Gulf allies to play a significant role in footing the costs and maybe providing some of those guarantees themselves.
Now, the indirect talks, of course, were held in Egypt, but Part 15 of the plan says the Temporary International Stabilization Force, or ISF, will work with Israel and Egypt to help secure border areas, along with newly trained Palestinian police forces. What do you make of the mention of Egypt here?
Well, Egypt obviously matters, a very, very important neighbor to this very territory, and conspicuously did not open its border through this 2-year period for migrants to flow out of the Palestinian areas into Egypt's sovereign territory. It is, I think, kind of an indication of why this is step 15 and not step 5. That is the mix of the countries that will be involved in this and what kind of role actual military or military-like personnel will play in this territory to help enforce the peace is going to be a sticky issue to go through. Watching out for other foreign influences that are either the surrogates for Iran that were Hamas or others reviving in different names. It's going to be a constant gardening exercise to make sure weeds don't grow. And so hopefully there's enough momentum with these Arab allies, including Egypt, to be a positive force for reconstruction and reconciliation. That would give Israel room to breathe. It would give the United States a lot of latitude to work for that broader positive regional agenda that the Abraham Accords envisioned in the first place.
And of course, before the October 7th attacks, the Saudis were in talks to join the Abraham Accords. Now, with this deal now signed, how likely are we to see the Abraham Accords expand, and which countries would likely sign on?
Well, in theory, I think that it was an historic framework, really just, I think, a once in a century kind of strategic event that could change the way people think and organize in a meaningful way, affecting global energy markets, affecting global security. I mean, it was really just that profound. And so I see the Abraham Accords platform as immensely important and valuable and worthy of expansion. There was good reason to believe Saudi Arabia would be a natural partner in that at some point. I think we'd have to just candidly assess how does this process unfold with the Gaza ceasefire. And as things look to move in the right direction and cooperation is positive among the right partners, that will just make the environment more natural for Saudi Arabia and others to say, yes, this is a framework that is good for our interests, good for the region, and we want to be a part of it.
And zooming out a bit here, Steve, during your time as Deputy National Security Advisor at the White House, the war on terror pivoted the U.S. focus and resources to the Middle East and away from China. Now, you're actually just in Taiwan. So how is Beijing likely watching this peace deal and what that means for its calculus in terms of a possible invasion on Taiwan?
Well, we can forever analyze how Beijing is going to look, and we will, of course, because it's important and it's hard to understand in no small part because Beijing is not transparent about what it's going to do. But obviously, Taiwan, Japan, the Philippines have been on the receiving end of some bullying and aggressive territorial claims, and aggressive military modernization seeks to overwhelm them across that first island chain and beyond. And China, in some ways, has to be conflicted in this regard because the more the United States is credited with making peace and trying to tell people to not change the status quo by force, but by economic and political negotiations only, that's an implicit message to Beijing, too, that it should not be looking to change the status quo in the Indo-Pacific by force, instead by economic and political negotiations only. That's the way they should look at it. Now, of course, they also love to see the United States tied down in Europe, the Middle East, and then maybe have a freer hand in the Indo-Pacific. But with a new, more conservative government coming in Japan, with the Philippines awakened, and with the United States maybe getting the first taste of success in the Middle East, Beijing should look more seriously about this non-military approach to achieving some objectives.
Well, Steve Yates, as always, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Coming up, California is set to change what kids eat at school. Governor Gavin Newsom just signed a first-in-the-nation law banning ultra-processed foods at schools. And in baseball's playoffs, Shohei Ohtani and the Dodgers look to eliminate the Phillies again tonight in LA. Dave Martin joins us to discuss when we return. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. California Governor Gavin Newsom has signed a new law to ban certain ultra-processed foods from school meals. The law aims to phase out these foods by 2035 and set new nutrition standards for students. NTD's Christina Corona tells us more.
California Governor Gavin Newsom has signed a first-in-the-nation bill banning public schools from serving ultra-processed foods in student breakfasts and lunches. Assemblymember Jesse Gabriel from the San Fernando Valley introduced the bill, calling it a science-based effort to ensure kids are eating real food instead of chemical-laden products.
As a dad, I was shocked and incredibly frustrated when I first learned that the U.S. lags far behind the rest of the world when it comes to protecting our kids from harmful additives.
He said California cares about its kids just as much as other countries do, like those in Europe or Asia, where children aren't exposed to as many processed foods.
So why would we offer them less protection from products linked to cancer and cardiovascular disease and reproductive harm?
Assembly Bill 1264, known as the Real Food Healthy Kids Act, directs the state's Department of Public Health to identify ultra-processed foods that pose the greatest health risks to students.
Foods that are high in fat, sugar, and salt, foods that have ingredients that are more likely to be found in a lab than in our pantries, foods that are engineered to hijack our kids' brains' reward centers have no place in our schools.
Schools must begin phasing out the ultra-processed foods by July 2029, with vendors prohibited from selling them to schools starting in 2032. Newsom says the law builds on California's leadership in protecting children's health and improving school nutrition standards. Under the new law, state scientists and University of California experts will classify foods as ultra-processed foods or restricted school foods based on additives, health risks, and potential for food addiction. According to the CDC, children and teens in the U.S. get about 62% of their calories from ultra-processed foods, which some studies have linked to cancer, heart disease, type 2 diabetes, and other health risks. The bill requires the California Department of Public Health to identify the most harmful ultra-processed foods and ensure they are removed from school menus by 2035. Reporting from the city of El Monte, Christina Corona, NTD News.
And now for your sports news, which are by NTD's Dave Martin. Dave, plenty going on right now, but let's start in baseball as we have two more playoff games going on today in the National League. What is the latest on the Phillies-Dodgers game?
Yeah, Phillies-Dodgers game started just 30 minutes ago. Right now, it's scoreless in the middle of the third inning, last I saw anyway, so not much actually happening at the moment. Now, heading into this game, though, Dodgers two-way star Shohei Ohtani was just 1 for 14 in this series with 7 strikeouts. Somehow the Dodgers are still ahead. Now, the Phillies, though, broke through finally with a win last night to extend the series. Kyle Schwarber broke out with a pair of home runs as the Phillies got to Clayton Kershaw for 5 runs in the 8th inning to blow the game open. They won 8-2. They still, though, trailed 2-1. Need a win today just to force a Game 5. Dodgers, meanwhile, can clinch the series with a win tonight. Then starting at 9 p.m. Eastern time, you've got the Cubs hosting the Brewers. Same story in this one. Chicago got a win yesterday to advance the series. They need another one tonight to stay alive there. This series is in Chicago. So meanwhile, the Brewers will start Freddie Peralta in this one against the Cubs' Matthew Boyd. And again, this game will be at 9 p.m. Eastern tonight. Winner of these series will face in an NLCS.
Well, looking at the American League, we had some heartbreak locally as the New York Yankees were eliminated by Toronto.
Yeah, you know, this was the primetime playoff matchup. I mean, the Yankees are always going to be on primetime. They're the most successful and popular baseball team out there. They're also the most disliked, but that's mainly because of their success. You know, they've won 27 World Series titles. That's more than double the second most. That's the Cardinals, actually, who have 11. And with their loss, their drought, if you can call it that, World Series drought, reaches 16 years without a World Series title. That's actually their third longest in history. That just shows how dominant they've been. Now, meanwhile, the Blue Jays, it was already all about their offense. Vlad Guerrero Jr. was incredible this series. Hit .529 with 3 home runs and 9 RBIs in the 4 games. Aaron Judge, meanwhile, broke out for New York, batted .600 in this series with a home run and 6 RBIs, but their pitching staff gave up nearly a run per inning, 32 earned runs in 34 innings there. So Toronto now moves on to the ALCS. They will face the winner of Detroit versus Seattle. That game will be tomorrow night at 9 p.m. in Seattle. So the Blue Jays, first one into the championship series in baseball here.
So you have a lot of late nights.
I have so much TV watching to do, Tiff. It's a lot of work, but I'm up to it, all right?
I'll have to buy you some green juices. Shifting gears to the NBA, LA Lakers superstar LeBron James will be sidelined 3 to 4 weeks due to a sciatica on his right side. Now, how would this timeline affect the start of the Lakers season?
Well, I guess he's definitely going to be out for the opener. That's going to be Tuesday, October 21st. That's just 12 days from now. The Lakers, one of 4 teams scheduled to play that night. They face the Warriors, while Kevin Durant and the new-look Houston Rockets face the world champion Oklahoma City Thunder. So it's a star-studded opening night, one with less star now, but the Lakers still do have Luka Doncic there. If he misses 3 weeks, though, which looks like the minimum, that takes us through October 30. That's 5 games he would miss. If it's 4 weeks, that'd be an additional 4 more games. That'd be 9 games to miss the start of the season. I mean, obviously, you'd rather have LeBron healthy at the end of the season for the playoffs, but it's not ideal missing this many games at any point, really, during the season. And even LeBron, I mean, he turned 40 years old last season, still finished top 25 in the league in scoring and rebounding and assists per game. Really the best 40-year-old we've ever seen in the league, and he'll turn 41 in December here. But the Lakers will certainly miss his production, and I'll miss seeing him play, you know, for the next 3 or 4 weeks. Looks like he will be back by at least early November. We'll see, though.
At least you have something to look forward to. Looking at tonight's Thursday night football action, though, we have the Philadelphia Eagles playing at the New York Giants.
Yes, a good rivalry game here. Saquon Barkley returns to MetLife Stadium as an Eagle, this time with a Super Bowl ring. The Eagles are coming off their first loss of the season last week. Now, the Giants, meanwhile, have some life in them with rookie quarterback Jackson Dart now starting at quarterback. They're 1-1 with him under center, but he's running out of healthy receivers to throw to. I mean, Malik Neighbors is already out for the season with a torn ACL. That elevated Darius Slayton to their top receiver, but he's going to miss this game with a hamstring injury, so we'll see what the Giants have behind their top 2 receivers there. Game starts at 8:15 Eastern time tonight, and it is on Amazon Prime. So I've got such a busy night here, Tiff. Be busy on that couch.
All the TV channels. Well, I'll let you go do that then.
Thank you. It's going to be a long night.
Dave, as always, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Tiff.
And that's all for today's news. For round-the-clock coverage, visit us at ntd.com/live or download our NTD app. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Good night.